So there we were. Did the first album was a big hit, and then I don't know. I was doing other stuff, and then came the second album.
Let's get to that, because that's the most bizarre. The whole cover, Civil War on the cover, and you're working in Los Angeles in a pool cabana. So how does that even happen?
Well, it's where you are in your head, you know.
Yeah, of course, but it's a little easier when your head is where you're. Yeah.
Well, it started. Robbie and I were very close. We were neighbors. We shared the same driveway. I was the godfather of his firstborn, and so in the preparation for the second album, which we were going to do in Los Angeles, we went to Hawaii with our spouses and his newest.
So everybody likes the warm weather, apparently.
Yeah, and we were there for a week working on material, and he was writing, I was writing, and then we went to L.A. in this house that had once belonged to Sammy Davis Jr.
So it didn't belong to him when the record was made.
No, it was already on the market and rentable. And we were all there with our spouses, and Robbie was there with his daughter and his mother.
Yeah.
Mama Kosh, she was always hanging around the band. I mean, she was an important spirit for them for some reason. It goes back further than I know. It goes back to their times in Canada.
Yeah.
And we recorded in the pool house, and we got Capitol to give us the equipment to use, and an echo chamber, an actual EMT echo chamber.
Now, they must have been happy about that, because it was probably far less expensive to be in there with the amount of time you wanted to take on this record than to be booking time in the studio.
Perhaps, yeah. Yeah.
And you had to soundproof the whole...
We did. We put sound blankets up and fiberglass and that kind of stuff.
And did you go into that knowing the kind of sound you wanted, or did it evolve?
You know, the instruments that we were using, we weren't using Fender guitars with the Marshall amplifiers turned up to 11.
Right.
It wasn't a bashing drummer. It wasn't a Fender precision bass player.
Right.
It wasn't screaming stuff. It was more colorful than that, So the palette was going to be broader, softer, easier, not as focused, not
and
as harsh.
That drum kit was an antique drum kit from a
pawn shop. He didn't have a drum set when he got there. We went shopping for a drum set.
And that's what he chose. And that was the whole record was like that. Was that drum kit.
Yeah.
That big fat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did that help dictate the sound? Because that thing is,
Sure.
Yeah,
whatever sound it had, that was the sound.
Yeah.
And that quote that, I don't know where it came from, that brought us together, that's saying that John is listed as engineer, but Robbie placed the microphones and mixed the album. And, like I said earlier, Robbie, like me, was someone who learned from experience. And one of the things he said to me when we started that album was, I want to learn what it takes to be a producer. I want to know what it is that you do.
I see.
So, even though he's credited as engineer on the album too, if you look.
Right.
Both of us are.
Right.
So, we just tried all these different microphones. Capitol gave us an assortment of microphones, and other microphone companies like Sennheiser gave us a bunch of things to just try out, you know. And we placed them in we had leisurely time. We placed them in different places, and like we had an upright piano, we placed the microphones behind the piano, in front of the piano, underneath, and different microphones, tried all the different EQs on all of them until we found something that we liked.
Yeah, because it mattered. But,
because it was very slow.
Not like that today at all.
Well, it's because, one sound worked with another sound and things like that.
Yeah.
And
how long did it take to produce that record?
Well, we ran out of time there because they had to go and do a concert at Fillmore or someplace in Winterland or someplace. I don't think it was in San Francisco, which was essentially the songs from the first album. So typically what we would do, is Robbie hadn't finished writing all the songs at all. He had pretty good ideas of most of them, but he would try them out he would write them for a particular voice, for Levon or Rick or Richard's voice, and try it out with them, and then, get it together and work on it. And then we'd go into the studio, and work on the song and work on parts and who was going to play what and what their part would be and what the bass line would be, what the drum parts would be. I spent most of my time on the drum gobos, right, in front of Levon, pointing at different parts of his drum set because he didn't read music, to remind him about what was coming next.
Wow.
And
was it the music actually written out?
Well, Garth could read music, but no, they weren't written. I mean, I would sometimes write them out. We'd write out chords, just the chords for Rick or.
So did you have complete songs in your head of how they would sound, and you sculpted it?
No.
Or they would produce, they would make sound, and you would sort of.
There was no one had a complete song in their head. Maybe Robbie did.
Yeah.
But as we went through it, we would find things that worked with the song, and then cut things out that didn't work. Take what you need, and leave the rest. And until everybody had something to play that made sense, or if someone didn't have something to play, they'd sit it out. Or if you needed somebody else to do something, like Rick was playing fiddle on Rag Mama Rabbit, and there was no bass, and so he said to me, "You play the tuba." I said, "I play the tuba." "No, I don't play the tuba. I play the baritone horn, which is smaller." He said, "Well, why don't you try playing the tuba?"
Nice.
Yeah. So that was the only time I ever played the tuba was on Rag Mama Rag.
And it's amazing on that song, you hear the tuba, the better your system gets, the more you hear that tuba as a distinct instrument. Otherwise, on really bad stuff, it's just like this mumble.
Right, sure.
And then as your system gets as your system gets better, the whole thing comes out of the primordial bull and separates out, and it's.
You've inspired me to get a better sound system. You have to give me recommendations.
I'll be happy to.
Within a budget.
You'll be a happy
Within
man.
a budget, please.
Okay.
I have those great big cabinets up there. We could probably screw something in the back of those cabinets. Maybe. I'll get rid of them. I have some of the speakers too. I have some nice. Anyway,
you'd have a good time. It's a terrific thing. Anyway,
yeah.
So did it feel like the Civil War when you were? I mean, when you walk into work, you close the doors, and you started. Did it have this feel that you were going back in time? I mean,
yeah, we definitely were not part of the Hollywood Sunset Strip thing that was happening a mile away.
Yeah.
We were making our own ambience.
And when you came out of there, did it become like Hollywood, and you go and be Hollywood, and then you go back in? And
I'll tell you this story. When we got all the equipment set up, finally, we first started out, we wanted to test it. So Dr. John just came out with his new album, Hollywood Babylon, or whatever it's called, and we put it on to listen to it. And this was, early in the morning at this point, because it took us a long while to get it up. And Dominique, Robbie's wife, comes running in, "Oh, Robbie, the cops. And, because she's French-Canadian. And we go outside, and there are the police, and it turns out that Sammy Davis Jr.'s pool house also had big speakers up by the pool. And we hadn't turned them off for some reason.
Oh.
And so blasting through the Hollywood Hills was that song, Patriotic Flag Waver, with the kids singing, "My country, 'tis of thee," out of tune.
Right.
For all these Hollywood producer moguls, at 4 a.m. in the morning.
It's 4 a.m. in the morning?
Yeah. "My country, 'tis of thee."
At least it was patriotic.
Yeah, so that was a shock of coming out of the Civil War thing into the... No, we weren't. I mean, we weren't. There weren't any Confederate flags around. We weren't wearing military uniforms or anything like that. And it wasn't only the Civil War. I mean, there were songs,
of course.
about Union, King Harvest, and...
I think King Harvest had a feel of a different period.
Yeah. Early Union time. But at one point, Antonioni, the Italian film director, shows up because he's doing a movie, and he's recommended him that the band do the score for his movie. So I remember we almost finished sitting there in the bed, because Levon slept in the studio, and listening to the "Standing by my window in pain, pistol in your hand." He goes, "Pistole, hey!" He didn't speak English.
Right, but he knew the one word.
Yeah.
And so, where did the cover art come from? Was that their own idea, or to dress up like that and do that whole thing, or did someone come?
They didn't dress up. That's what they wore. That's what they...
Really?
Yeah. Does it look Civil War to you?
Yeah, they look all scruffy and...
That's what they wore.
Am I making that up? Am I seeing...
They dressed scruffy.
Yeah, and where were the pictures taken? Up here somewhere?
Probably Elliot Landy, I think, took it up in...
Yeah.
Maybe they're all wet. Maybe he took it in a rainstorm. Is that the one they took in a rainstorm with their hair's all plastered down like that?
It's all sepia toned and...
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It was to make it look old, not necessarily Civil War.
And then someone had to take all that and make that brown textured cut. And where did all that come from? Because the whole thing is so perfect.
Bob Cato, I think, was involved at that one. Now, Bob Cato was the art director at Columbia Records, somebody I knew when I connected them up too. So.
There's another record Bob Ludwig cut that it was cut by Bob, and they fortunately didn't override what he did because that bass is really.
Mm-hmm.
And then the record came out, and if you remember what the reviews were about, sonically they said it's mud. I mean, all these reviewers, I remember, they were all saying it's muddy, but it really wasn't muddy. It's just that, you know, all the music critics that I know, it's so crazy. They look at it as a badge of honor to not have a good stereo. It's like some bad thing. And when I was in Hollywood, I'd go to these guys' offices. I was at, Gil Friesen at A&M Records, and it was boom boxes, and I said, why don't you have a decent stereo to hear what you're putting out? Well, we want to hear what the kids... I said,
well, that's true.
When Steven Spielberg, screens a movie, he doesn't hang a sheet in his office and have an 8mm projector. He goes to the Academy screening room to see what it looks like. And he doesn't say, well, I'm going to go to Podunk to see what it looks like when it gets to the, to the Cinderblock Palace, and he sees it as good as it can be. So
I always listen to a record back in the studio that I mixed it in.
Yeah.
And that's where it's always going to sound best, because that's those speakers I mixed it
right.
on. At home, I've never had a good system. I'm embarrassed to show you what I've gotten.
It's time for you to get one.
I think it is too.
I'll be here to help you get it.
I think it is too.
So is that that's the pinnacle of your that record was the pinnacle of your producing, and because that's one of the great records of the entire decade, or the.
I mean, it depends how you look at it. Yeah. I mean, it certainly was, popular. I mean, there are records like I mentioned that. I mean, I cut a song with a woman called Rachel Farrow called "Refugees." That I consider a pinnacle, and some of the stuff with Hearth is really funny and pinnacle. Some of the stuff I did with Gil Evans, I think, is fabulous.
What did you do with Gil?
I did an album called Priestess with Gil Evans, and when Dave Sanborn's album, there's a song called Short Visit that I wrote that Gil arranged that knocked me out.
Oh, that's a different thing. When you write a song and he arranges just
yeah. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? So I mean, but there are lots of things, and then Michael Frank's album that's the one I use as my demo. Tiger in the Rain album.
I have to get a copy of that.
And then I did some albums for Japanese people. One for a woman named Keiko Lee that I like a lot. So I mean, there are all kinds of pinnacles at different levels.
Yeah, different.
But as far as something that's popular and was a pinnacle, yeah, sure.
It's an iconic record, It's nice to be associated with something like that.
You bet. Yeah. It would be nicer if you get a royalty from it, but I don't.